again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode 4 of Unheard Of, a podcast dedicated to uncovering interesting and new Chatham stories. I'm your host, Aryan Kumar, and today I'm here joined by Councilwoman Kate Hay, who also happens to be my swim coach at the Madison Area YMCA, and who I've also happened to know for many fun, around 5-6 years.
Yeah.
We're going to try to understand your new role as Councilwoman, and your kind of leadership and contribution to Chatham, in addition to some of your other initiatives and personal experiences that you've experienced in your life. And Ms. Kate, I thank you for joining me today. I hope you're doing well.
I am doing well. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. Let's jump right in. What did the road to Miss Kate Hay today look like? What did your childhood look like growing up?
Well, I grew up in Chatham, so it's probably very similar to something you can understand. It was very suburban New Jersey, I would say, but at the same time, I was interested in a lot of things. You know me from coaching and swimming, and I did do that, but this is something I don't always talk about with you guys, but I was always incredibly passionate about the performing arts as well. So I was very involved in like acting and dancing, and at one point I wanted to be a fashion designer, so I did that too. But I spent a lot of time commuting into the city. I took acting classes from the years like 12 to when I graduated high school in New York City. So I did a lot of being in the city, and I think that's probably something that's more unique. I should hope all you kids get on the train and go see one of the greatest cities in the world, but realize that it really is your backyard, and it has a lot to offer. So I did that. I've also done like community theater in Montclair. Like, the thing about growing up in New Jersey is that there's just so much for you to take advantage of. And I think what you will discover, what ultimately brings a lot of people back, is that there's really, and I've traveled around the world. I've been to Europe and Africa and Japan and New Zealand and all these other places, and you really do eventually find that there is this everything is kind of here in New Jersey. It's not that there aren't places like this in the world, but it is incredibly accessible. I mean, particularly in Chatham, like we have the airport that's right there. That's an international airport. All of those things bring a lot of culture and diversity into a place that would otherwise be pretty homogenous and suburban. So that's pretty cool, and that's something that I think makes a childhood in Chatham unique because of its accessibility to so much. So in addition to, like, think about it, like we have the shore, we have the mountains. Like, very few people have that much things happening in their immediate space or within an hour or two. So
I mean, that's amazing. Acting classes in New York City from Chatham. Your parents were totally okay with that?
Oh, yeah. So my uncle, that's who I do radio promotion with, so we'll get into that in a while, lived in New York and now lives in Brooklyn and Park Slope. So he was the one taking acting classes at this place called HB Studios, which is famous because it's if you know anything about theater, it was founded by these two individuals, Uta Hagen and Herbert Bergdorf. That's why it's called HB Studio. And it was in like a very, without going into it, it's an incredibly prestigious acting school, but it's also made for the people. So you don't have to be some sort of like, somebody. It really came out of a time of a lot of these people were communists. So in the early 20s and 30s, and so it came out of this acting school of like communal artists. Actors Studio in New York is also one of them. Stella Adler is one of them. If you've ever heard of, we don't do this at HB, but method acting was like sort of born out of these people. Summer stock, which is like you go up to New England and you do theater there, is also very much a part of this community. So my uncle was studying there, and when I was 12, after having sort of gone through, which I eventually took design into costume design. So one of my theater techs is costume design. I can costume design. But so, you know, once I went to like, I did classes at FIT and stuff like that, and I started to move away from that. I also thought about being a baker, but I didn't love the hours of that. You do have to wake up at like, which is silly because I wake up for swim meets.
Right.
But it's way more intensive. But I didn't necessarily want to go to pastry school. I always wanted to do something creative. And then eventually I got to acting class, so from the ages of 12 to 18, and then I would, after college, I returned back to HB2. But that's another chapter as well. So I did acting class in the city. It's really not that far because it's in the West Village. So a lot of it was like my parents would drive me in on Sunday, and it would be a 3-hour class. And they love the village too. We have deep roots there from my dad's family. So my dad is American, but of Scottish and Irish descent. And so most of his family before moving to New Jersey lived in the West Village, including Grove Street. So like it was very familiar to us. So it still is. So it's very much a character in like who we are as people. And so like my parents would just like hang out there, just eat. There's anybody who knows, like the West Village is like the high rent district. So there's tons of restaurants. All this stuff. It wasn't really like that when it just started turning that way. HB was kind of like the last vestige of like artsy village, sort of. So I had a lot of these like teachers in there that were like prolific in the 60s and 70s and stuff like that, and they're a lot older. My teacher as a child was Trudy Steibel. I think she still teaches there.
Wow.
Like they were like real New Yorkers. Like they weren't, dressed up for fancy. They were sort of like subway, like walk everywhere, like just wanted you to do good work kind of thing. Very modest. Like, going to HB wasn't even really that expensive, and so I would say it was pretty unique experience.
It sounds very unique, and you mentioned all these different interests of yours as a child, so that I can help but wonder any childhood inspirations. I mean, you have a wide variety of interests. Anyone you looked up to?
A lot of inspirations. I think in a lot of realms. What's interesting though is I'm a twin, and we were both born 3 months premature. So one thing I speak to is we both have this disability called cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is I'll get to why this is important. A spectrum disability. So what I have is very minor compared to like there are people who literally are in wheelchairs, can't speak, etc., etc. But my sister has a little bit more disability for various reasons, and CP is also not genetic. It happens at birth. It causes brain damage, so it's akin to like a stroke, I guess. But since I've had it since birth, I don't really know if that's like the appropriate equivalency. But so the person that inspires me is like my sister. Like, so that seems so silly.
That's super
but
nice.
she's actually in casting now, so she does the other side of
acting
and performing. And she does a lot of this like disability activism and stuff like that. But like my sister was always inspirational to me. I would argue she's probably smarter than me.
Okay.
So yeah, that's nice. I look up to a lot of my ancestors. One thing, going back to like the whole West Village thing. We have a lot of information on my dad. My mom is a little different because she's Cuban, so her family history is kind of lost in a lot of like wars and changing places and things like that. But with my dad's family, we have like a very clear, like, this person lived here and worked there and did this and came from Ireland, and he's like 75% Irish and 25% Scottish. So it's
nice
like
combination.
It's not really. It's a little island and they're cousins, but so from coming from there, like, you know, I have all those things, so like those people kind of inspire me, knowing those stories. They were all like longshoremen and then eventually became clerks and managers. One of my great grandfathers actually in Passaic, New Jersey, which is in Morris County, was like the foreman at the U.S. rubber factory.
Oh wow.
So like those people inspire me. My grandparents on my mom's side inspire me because they came from Cuba. So like having a little bit of an immigrant understanding is also very different than just like having two parents who were here. My mom came when she was 4, so she's essentially American. Like she doesn't really. We had family in Cuba, so I was able to visit Cuba. But like it is really one of those things that when your family comes from, in our case, a communist country, it's not as easy to stay connected to all of that. So for my grandparents to come at like, my grandma was 27 and, you know, she had a kid already and like, you know, it's kind of, you think of how much they endured. They didn't speak the language at all. Like my grandma went to college, which is like my grandpa did not. It's not a common thing. It's actually generally like a class thing in Cuba. So she was well educated, but those degrees that she had, because she had an accounting degree, does not like translate to the US. So she worked a lot in like factories and all this stuff. So but it ultimately led to like, she's still alive. She lives in Harrison, if anybody's interested, Harrison, New Jersey. But you know, like, be incredibly inspiring because you'll realize one day when you're 27 how young that actually is in the grand scheme of all of this, and how impressive
that's definitely.
So I would say like all of those people. My dad has 4 sisters too, so like the women in my family are very influential, my mom included. My mom has always worked. She was president and vice president in wholesale, retail, and handbags, and she started at Macy's as like just a manager and stuff like that, and then eventually moved up. So my mom's always had like a very impressive corporate job, which is also unique to Chatham. At least when I was growing up, a lot more of the moms, not everybody, there was definitely working moms, but there was more of a community of like stay-at-home moms, even, and there's, again, that's nothing wrong with that, but like it was kind of interesting to have a mom who was
different,
working and had quite a stressful job. So I would say like my mom and my aunts are also like incredibly influential in that way. Like they're all pretty career driven in their own respect. Like my one aunt, Caroline, is like huge in my life. She is a director at catering at Westchester Country Club, but she
Wow.
worked at like Hilton's and all this stuff
Wow.
when I was a kid. My Aunt Mary she was a stay-at-home mom for a period of time, but she's now runs like the tennis shop at the Atlantic Club in Manasquan. So
Nice.
from New York to Bergen County, my dad's family moved down the shore, and that's mainly where he grew up. So like she does that. She loves tennis. She's athletic.
Mm-hmm.
She also is artsy though, so she
Nice.
has her own. She makes her own pottery, but she's
Wow.
like a fine artist.
Wow.
Like she can paint. So like arts and sports, the things you see me doing are like very of my family.
Very connected to your
So
family.
like my Aunt Caroline was a star track runner.
Wow.
Okay. She in the time she was like she's still probably more athletic than me. Like she's kind of like my fitspiration, as I would say. So like I come from very influential people in my life in that respect. I kind like everything that interests me kind of comes from them, whether you realize it or not. Yeah. So yeah.
We'll get more into that later on. But you're mentioning a lot of these career-driven family members of yours, and kind of your interest as a child growing up. You're now Councilwoman of Chatham.
Yeah.
So
do I have ties in politics? Actually, I do. So this kind of all started. I did study political science at GW George Washington, where I went.
I might be applying there.
Oh, are you? Well, good.
Yeah, very soon. Soon.
We'll write a recommendation for your kid. I also know the person who's involved in New Jersey with like. So if you need
we'll chat off camera.
We'll chat. You can cut this or don't. I don't care.
That's fine, no.
Whatever you want. But so at GW I studied political science. I always knew I wanted to come back to acting and performing, but I also talked to a lot of mariners about this all the time.
Wow. Nice.
But I also think that college is about learning. You will do 100% of your job, whatever it is, you're gonna learn that as you're in the job. So take college for the education. If you are a thinker, if you are good at writing, if you are good at speaking, if you are good at presenting yourself, if you are good at working in groups, those are the things that college teaches you. And you also learn to grow as an adult. Like you're gonna be your first time to do that. So I knew that I wanted to be a performer, but I didn't necessarily just want to go to college for performing. So I chose what's called a Bachelor of Arts. So when you are a performer, there's 2 different degrees you can get. It's a Bachelor of Fine Arts and a Bachelor of Arts. A Bachelor of Fine Arts is generally like a concentrated program where they that's at NYU. That's at Mason Gross, at Rutgers, those kind of schools. You can apply to there, but that's literally all you will be doing, because it's essentially going to like conservatory, that's another leg of performing arts. But so I didn't want that, so I studied political science. I have always loved politics and government and policy, probably because my mom is from Cuba, but also because my dad's family is incredibly political. They have a history. I will say we are a bit biased sometimes. They are long-standing Democrats. My dad is what culturally would consider Irish Catholic. So when you think of like the Kennedys and all that, that's like very much them. But interestingly enough, going back to knowing about family members, I have a great aunt, so my dad's great aunt, Grace, who was the head of Parks and Rec in Boonton, New Jersey.
Wow.
So she was in local government, and she actually has a park named after her. So if you go to Grace Buckley Park, that's her. That's my great aunt. And so, with that, civil service is like very normal for my family, whether it's, I have another cousin who's a lawyer, like that's,
wow.
So that is in some ways civil service, but like being involved in your community above politics, like it is just sort of something we value. And so when I was given the opportunity to join council, this was very logical, especially because I have a unique perspective on what it's like, because I'm not an adult who came to Chatham. I'm born and raised here. So I've gone through the school system. I know what it's like to grow up here and like what makes it nice to grow up, despite, when you have teenage angst and you're like, I just want to get out of here. Yeah. I do recommend to get out, but I kind of recommend it more for you to see what you actually have. Got it. So
that's some good advice. And honestly, I'm really impressed that you remember everything about your family and you remember what each person did. Wow. I mean, that's amazing. How has your experience been as councilman so far?
It's been really great. It's a lot of little things, if you ever watch Parks and Rec, it is kind of like that. You deal with, we have a lot of citizens who are very much involved, and it's like incredibly valuable to have their insight, because they bring stuff to your attention that you literally would never have thought of. And that's why I'm always saying, like, it's really funny. Even Mariner's parents who are from Chatham, if they ever come up with stuff, they're like, hey, have you guys ever taken a look at this? I'm happy to listen to it, because at least in local government, it is really truly about our community. It's something as small as like, do we need a stop sign here? Or do we... like one of the groups I'm on is like community gardens. I think that's an incredible little garden. It's by Cougar Field. And they have, I think I know what you're talking about. And they have members, but like that's a great space. It's a communal space. We were just talking about the library and how we can improve
at the Library of the Chathams.
So that is something, interestingly enough, that the borough and the township share, even though we're two separate municipalities. So, and to me, it's a really important building. I spent a lot of time volunteering there as a kid. I was there almost every day in the summer. We didn't really join, even though I was part of swimming, because my dad grew up down the shore. We would go down the shore on the weekends. So I wasn't really at a community pool. Because we weren't here enough to do that. So like the library was kind of like my thing to do when I didn't have camp and stuff like that. And so I eventually became a volunteer. And I don't know if you remember Aiden Kagan. He was a little bit older than you. But he would come to the library. We had this program in the summer. And he was one of the little kids that would come tell me about what he read. So you would essentially log how many things you read, and you could get prizes and stuff like that. And I was one of the volunteers for that. So like, that space is really important. So we were just talking about that. We do big stuff like where, we talk about our town budget. So that gets into like what we can buy and take on or support, improvements in the town, but that affects our taxes. So that's why that affects everybody, and everybody has a say in that. And we try our best not to raise taxes, but sometimes for the greater good, unfortunately, has to be done. So one of the cool things I'm really excited about is we are actually getting a new fire truck, which is something we've needed for a while. So I'm happy to have done that. one of my
Is that something that's really
yeah,
recent?
so that was part of the budget, so that's an example of the budget. One of the things I'm actually passionate about is getting EV chargers in town. I drive an electric car,
Yes,
so
that'd be very
I may
convenient.
have a personal vested interest in
Yeah.
that, but I really do want to bring newer technology into Chatham to support our infrastructure. Like, I really like our historical background because that obviously, as you know, I like history.
Yes.
So that's important for me to retain, but I also think that we always need to be moving forward and being progressive and all that stuff. So things like EV charger, we're trying to figure out where to put solar panels. That's going to be a big project. So
that's gonna be interesting to see around Chatham.
Yeah, that's exciting, and I'm very involved in the Environmental Commission. That's probably one of my favorite groups that I'm a part of. I'm also on the health board, so I've learned a lot about our community's health and what's important. So there's a lot of things, and it's little and big picture stuff, and it's really cool. It's a way that I've not seen the town despite my many years here. So yeah.
Is there anything that you specifically like or dislike, or anything that's really surprised you about being in this new role of councilwoman, seeing Chatham through a different lens?
I don't think there's anything I dislike, and nothing's surprised me. But it is just a lot to take in. So I am grateful actually to sort of get this like trial run here where I'm learning the ropes, because I was asked to fill the seat for the mayor, which was really cool. That means a bunch of my peers who are involved in the current council were like, she'd be a good candidate, and they approached me because I don't actually think I would have run if I wasn't asked. So this like sort of trial year, it's not, I'm involved, but it's in a way like I didn't just win an election, now I'm being thrown in. I get to have a year where I learn it, and then I can effectively say, actually, this is important work. I can keep doing this work. So yeah.
Do you think you feel more in touch with Chatham than maybe when you were a kid? I mean, you're now a councilman, you're leading town, you're making all these decisions. One would maybe think that because everyone's coming to you with like ideas, you're tasked with coming up with ways to make Chatham a better place, that you'd be more in touch. But like you said, you're also born and raised here, so do you think that?
Yeah, I don't actually. I think you're in touch in different ways.
Different ways.
I, as a kid, was like very involved in things, and I was kind of all over town, and I joined every club, and you know, I did theater in high school, but I was also still, a lot of the things I do now on council mirror what I did then. So I was like in environmental club, I was the vice president, I was in Spanish club, I did key club at one point, I did debate club, I did forensics, I did I did like so much, and I just really kept myself busy. I was a Girl Scout as a kid, like, so I was like very involved in that respect. Actually, it's funny, my Aunt Mary, the one who lives down the shore, has somebody's parent who grew up here, and like we were in the same grade, and I think the way she described my sister and I, because my sister is equally as like all over the place, but she lives in Chinatown now in Manhattan.
Nice.
But so she was like, "Oh, they're always doing something," and I was like, "That's like one way
sums it up,
to describe who we are. Like we just have been." But obviously, like the lens of a child is like drastically different than the lens of an adult. But I think a lot of the things I was passionate still inform like what I'm trying to do now, because in a way I do have a lot more power than I did when I was younger.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So kind of diverting from your role as councilwoman, you know, you've already kind of touched on this, but you're involved in many different things outside of being on the council, including your entrepreneurship, with some of your own businesses.
Yeah.
You're also my swim coach for
Yeah.
Madison. Can you explain how you manage all these different roles?
I manage
Detail
this?
your experiences with those.
So I've done a lot of things in my life. A lot of it comes out of the fact that I wanted to continue pursuing performing arts, and
Yep.
I do a lot of sketch comedy and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still very much a dream, but like, you know, as adult life would have it, you do have to pay your bills and be a responsible human. But every experience brings its own passion. So interestingly enough, even though I gave up swimming in my senior year, I'm telling all of the Mariners now, if you did not already know, because I was so tunnel vision about performing arts. And I think this is something I talk to you guys a lot about. It's not that I regret my decisions, but I feel like if some adult just told me to stick with what I like instead of like worrying so much about the future, it would have, like, I would have just stayed swimming. It wasn't really that much of a taking me away from performance.
And just to clarify, you quit that senior year, you didn't do the senior year. Okay.
So I got as far as being a captain and deciding the swimwear, and I swam for about a month, because the thing was you couldn't do the spring musical if you were swimming.
Okay, got it.
So my theater teacher at the time was like, I auditioned, but I'm not a musical theater person. I'm what you would consider straight theater, so that's just like serious roles and like and like no music and no dancing or whatever. Even though I did all that, I'm just like not good at it. You can do things that you're not good at and not necessarily have to be amazing at it, right? Like it still brings you joy. But so I auditioned, and my teacher was like, you know what? I think I want you to direct. I think you'd be much better as like a producer. You could help do all this stuff. And I was like, okay, sure. And that was quite an experience. I mean, now I produce my own work, so maybe that gave me the tools to do that. But I also think I should have just stuck it out to swim.
I forgot. I'm gonna have to be designing the swimmer, and hopefully, if we get another state championship, we'll be designing the rings.
And I like highly recommend that. I think it's so important. Hold on, I'm gonna stop this phone call. My father is calling me. He's fine. He's alive. I promise. But so it's one of those things that like you can have multiple passions. So I would say a lot of my work is because I have multiple passions. I'm very passionate about being your coach. I can tell. I care a lot about you guys, and I care a lot about your mental game in this. I think where I shine as a coach sometimes is more strategic and more intellectualizing the situation for you and giving you a game plan, and also being empathetic and understanding that you're a whole person. So those are my strengths. I would assume that's why you all come over.
That's perfectly explained. I mean, there's a reason I come to coaches after my swims, especially when I don't do well, is to receive feedback and in some way affirmation that, you know, one bad swim does not define the entire meet for you or that entire month going forward. And I think you've been there for me these past few years as a coach and as a person who I could just talk to about how I'm feeling outside of swimming. You give me great advice for swimming, and you're always open to conversation. So I'd personally say that you've done really, really well. You've done really, really well for me.
I appreciate that. But so like that's my goal, because I think a lot of what I want you guys to take away from swimming is that the things you learn as a swimmer apply to your life. So that's like one way I balance that. Is swimming gave me a lot of structure. Theater gave me a lot of structure. When you were in those two arenas that don't have a massive payoff. Like they don't. You don't. The chances of you being famous or an Olympian or are very slim, but that's not why you do things, right? So those two have allowed me to like really schedule my life in a way where I can be creative in other ways. So the other job that I do when you don't see me is radio promotion. And so I help mostly small artists, like independent artists who don't have labels, get on the radio. We work mainly with Americana, which is like country leaning, singer-songwriter, this thing called AAA radio. So it's like NPR, it's like college radio stations, it's other smaller radios, community radio stations. But there's networks of like over 300 stations still in existence, and it is still like incredibly important for an artist to have that. And I think what I like about my day jobs is that they leave a lot of room for creativity. So, you know, it might surprise you, but coaching allows you to think of like things on your feet within a structure. So like, you know, I take a look at movement in the body and things like that. That's very much a creative pursuit. In radio promotion, I'm helping other artists. It's not necessarily my art, but I'm helping other artists get heard on the radio, which is a stepping stone to things like managers and record deals and all sorts of stuff. We do work with bigger artists. Like right now I'm promoting for the 4th time Ringo Starr's music. But we've worked in the past with Ben Harper, who's he's a delightful individual, and I really recommend his latest work. It's my dog likes to listen to it. He is an anxious dog. And for some reason, Ben's voice or whatever, his early work is what people know him for. That's when he became famous. But I really, this particular album that we worked, and I don't just say that when I work albums, because there's some artists that we help that I'm not necessarily on board with. Like we did a lot of stuff that I'm just kind of like, that's okay. But Ben's stuff is great, and he's a good person, so like that's a lot of it. But yeah, so like that's led me to cool places. But then my newest venture is skincare, and we'll be at the Fishwack.
Lovely, I'll be there.
Interested, but we do only have one product on the market right now, and it's our moisturizer. It's a face and body moisturizer, so it's a one-stop shop. You do not have to use a billion products. But how did I develop that? Well, I told you I bake, so I have always baked. And chemistry is very much baking, and I had very sensitive skin and was sort of like, what do I do here? I hate everything on the market right now, and I just kind of wanted to set out.
Did you hate it because it didn't work?
It wasn't working. I have ADHD too, and so I think a lot of things for me to have to do with how much time I have to put into it. I have to like legitimately tell myself, okay, like brush your teeth right now and things like that. And so my moisturizer being like, I have a moisturizer for my body, and then I have a moisturizer for the day, and I have a moisturizer for the night, and then all these things that I don't know that males necessarily partake in this. They should. You have skin, but I do
have a little bit of dry skin.
Yeah. But especially as a swimmer,
you
should be a moisturizing fiend. But I kind of wanted something that was simplified and that could travel with you through the ages. So I thought about what I needed in my teen skin all the way to my grandmother loves my moisturizer, and she's in her 80s. So like it's supposed to be something that once you build a routine, it's something you can rely on. So the moisturizer is the first product because this is all self-funded. So every single hour that I put in at the Y
it goes towards this.
Goes back to my business. So and you know, so there's it's a lot of cyclical fulfillment and scheduling, and sometimes I'm not successful. As today was a perfect day. One of my famous things is that I'm late a lot, but it's because I'm doing a lot. Most people aren't doing as much as I'm doing, and I'm not saying like lateness is good, it's not. But if you one thing, if I can teach people, is like just show up. Like 95, what is it, 99%, whatever the statement is, 99% of success, I think is Yogi Berra, is showing up. So being present. I truly, and I am in the minority on this, I truly do not care if you come 15 minutes late. If you were successfully able to go to, let's pretend you had a club, and then you had this, and then you got to practice, and then you worked hard and practiced, like you just showed up, you got in, you did your thing.
That's what I try to do.
You know, I think that's a mark of a successful person. And if you do that consistently and you are supportive of the people around you, that's success.
Makes sense.
A lot of people don't show up. You will learn that in every facet. So like creating my own brand and stuff like that just comes out of creativity. A lot, it's just, in juggling this much, you just have to be like very scheduled. If you ever look at, I write things down, I have my Apple calendar always going off. I immediately adjust if something is happening. Actually, I was listening to Zendaya and Kelly Clarkson talk about their lateness all the time. They're like, I'm either terribly early or like horrifically late. And that's partly because they're women in demand. Like they need their somewhere. So like what I would just recommend is know that you show up. Know that it's important. Know that when you get there, it's hard work. Like, I don't know if you ever noticed, but when I am late, I go immediately into, like, as I'm walking through the door, I'm already thinking of, like,
you already
where I need to be, who I need to talk to, how to zone in. I think what frustrates me about lateness sometimes is the nonchalantness about it, right? It's not okay. It's not. I'm not an advocate for it, but if it is what's happening because you are doing X, Y, Z, then you need to be on your game all the time, moving pieces and having flexibility. So I think, do I do it perfectly? No, but do I do everything that I'm passionate about? Yes.
With all these different like pursuits of yours, and you've kind of touched in it a little bit here and there, but what would you say has been your biggest obstacle in life, and how has it kind of shaped or changed your perspective in life with dealing with obstacles? How do you kind of focus on getting over them or getting around them to make sure that you stay happy, you're able to continue pursuing what you want to in life?
I think my two obstacles, which are one, I was born with a disability, so a physical disability. So there's definitely a lot of times in my life that it took twice as long to do something. And then my second one is probably being that I am the child of immigrants and speak Spanish. Only half, but still. I think sometimes in a more homogenous community like Chatham, it's not really like this anymore for you guys, and I'm quite excited about that. But people assume things of you. So I think those two things, and I've lived a very privileged life, I should say that. I grew up here. I used to go on vacations in Europe, so this is not me like being like I had less privilege. I have had immense privilege, which probably has helped these things that I'm about to talk about, these struggles. But I guess my biggest hurdle is probably getting judged by my cover. So, but I think a lot of that to get over it is just sort of like trust yourself, be patient with yourself, and just like keep your image alive. And it's a lot harder. It is hard. It's not something you're just like naturally gonna do.
Right.
But eventually over time you just are more confident in the opinions of other people. I would probably say that's the biggest hurdle, is other people will try to make you feel small.
Yep.
Whether they mean to or
Right.
not.
Yeah.
A lot of people say things out of like a subconscious reaction to
Yep.
something, right? And
they don't realize how
and they
how it
don't
comes
realize
off.
how what it's doing, right?
Right.
So yeah, and I just think like, and those things will create limits for yourself. So, you know, and I can bring it back to swimming too,
Sure.
but I tell
Yeah.
tell you guys all the time, what's great about this sport is that you are competing against yourself.
Yep.
So you can have blinders on. You can focus just on you and you being the priority. And I think that's important. And I don't mean it in like an egotistical way. I think
Right.
you need to have empathy. I think you need to recognize how your actions affect other
yeah.
people. But I do think you need to kind of believe your own hype.
Got it.
Yeah.
Believe your own hype.
Yeah.
You're already kind of touching on it, but if you just had one piece of advice to give to anyone struggling or just anyone in life in general, what would it be? Would it be trusting in yourself, just pushing forward?
Yeah, trust yourself. And then I would also say like, and this is something I'm constantly working on, is
Yep.
like being present in your moment. Just because there's different measures of success, and I think a lot of times we think of like the pinnacle. Like for me, we'll bring it back to acting.
Yeah.
It would be to get like a feature film and just be able to never have to do another job again.
Huh?
In theory,
Indeed.
that would be very fulfilling, but there are so many parts of me that I would still want to keep going. So it's kind of like, what does that look like? And I think those ideas of success and pinnacles of success limit you in recognizing how much you do day in and day out. So if you are struggling, you bring it back to your present, believe in your own hype, and I think it's daily evolution. Just be kind to yourself is like my advice. Is each step, having gone through my 20s, like your early 20s are very different than your late 20s, and I'm only beginning the 30s, but like each one brings different, and most people would suggest that I am fairly young, and I would agree with them.
Yeah.
One thing that you learn is like each step brings different things. You evolve as a person, and so in itself that is success and that is progress and all that stuff. So if someone is struggling, like I think the biggest thing is sit with yourself, literally write down the things you're happy you accomplished. Sometimes all it takes is like looking at what you've already done.
Yep.
So yeah, that's probably my advice.
I know I can definitely improve.
Yeah, but just trust yourself too. I think you know yourself better. You may and will make mistakes, but you know yourself the best. And you know, other people's advice is great, but sometimes take your own. Yeah. The worst that can happen is that it messes you up a little bit, but like that you'll get right back to where you were supposed to be.
Yes.
So yeah.
That's great advice. Like I said, something I can definitely improve on. But we'll wrap it up with this one. This is kind of an interesting one for you. Is there anything that I should have asked or considered that I didn't, or anything that you want to add as a final lending? Or...
No, this was like very well thought out, and
Okay,
like I don't know who's watching this, but you know, I'm definitely gonna share this, and I really think this is great on a local level. And I'm really happy you're doing this. I'm quite impressed that you're doing this. These are the kinds of things that I hope you remember when you're older.
For sure.
So I think you asked really poignant questions. I think you did a good job.
All right.
And this is very cool. So yeah.
Well, thank you, Miss Kate. That's all that's all I have for you today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on this podcast, help me get a better understanding of Chatham, about you, what you do outside of outside of being Councilwoman, and then helping Chatham grow yearly. Lastly, I just want to thank every one of you for watching and listening. I really appreciate it, and we will see you next time. Thank you once again.